Hey everyone, Holly here. I'm one of the conscious agents with Reality Sandwich, and I am joined by Adam today, who's going to be sharing his experience with a psychedelic substance called Bufo. Welcome, Adam. It's great to have you joining us today. Tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, Holly. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name's Adam Mazio. I've been working in the psychedelics field for, I don't know, about 3 years or so now. And I fell into it by accident. I've been doing marketing and content marketing for, I don't know, about the past 10 to 15 years. And the field found me by chance coming out of an ayahuasca retreat. And I switched fields and got into the psychedelics field, writing, doing content marketing. And it's a perfect place for me to be because I know a ton about psychedelics. I've been using them for a long time, recreationally, spiritually, therapeutically. So I have a ton of knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and background. So it comes quite naturally to me.
Okay, yeah, you definitely have a lot of experience with psychedelics. Then how long have you, or when maybe was your first experience with psychedelics that kind of set you out on the path to be interested in this field or interested in experimenting?
Uh, I first started using psychedelics in college when I was 18 years old, and it's that just kind of paved the way for me for the rest of my life. There's just something about psychedelics in terms of the allure and irresistibility of the mystery and the unknown that they lead you into. And I've always been very interested in, old school psychonauts and explorers like Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, Albert Hoffman, Terence McKenna, these kinds of people. So I've always kind of taken, a semi-academic, scientific approach to them. So yeah, that's just set me up for life, and it's really interesting, exciting field to be working in now with the psychedelic revival that we're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, similar story kind of started back then, and just watching this evolution has definitely continued to raise interest in general. So we're going to talk a little bit about Bufo today. So before we get too into that, can you explain a little bit about what this substance is for those who may not understand where it comes from, how it's used?
Sure. Bufo obviously is also having a moment along with the psychedelic revival. It's arguably the world's strongest naturally occurring organic, I guess you could say, psychedelic. Perhaps one of the only other ones that's equivalent would be iboga. And it comes from, I believe, colloquially, it's known as the Colorado River toad, or I mean, the Sonoran desert toad. Excuse me. It lives in the Colorado River, though, and it's a psychedelic venom that it excretes from its back. The West discovered it, I believe, in the 1980s. There was an American man living in Texas. I believe his name was Ken Nelson. He kind of, quote unquote, discovered it and wrote a little booklet or pamphlet about it. But it's been used for a long time, perhaps thousands of years prior, by indigenous Mesoamerican cultures. I believe there's some evidence that the Olmecs used Bufo Alvarius, and perhaps the Mayans as well. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were maybe they were licking the back of the toad, as everybody knows, or they were eating it. I believe Ken Nelson in Texas in the 80s, when he produced his pamphlet about it, he was one of the first people, if not the first in the West, to discover how to harvest it and then to smoke it. So now mostly everybody that does Bufo is smoking it.
Okay, that's nice to hear. I was always kind of curious about, A, how do you discover something like this? Who's literally just the first guy to lick a frog and be like, fantastic. And then this is great. And then, yeah, the evolution of, okay, now we've progressed to harvesting, and now this is something that you smoke. That is the method of ingestion for Bufo. Okay.
Yeah, and it's quite fascinating because with the Olmecs using it, the Olmecs lived in far southern Mexico, and where the toad lives is up north in the desert, along the border of Texas New Mexico, Arizona, along the border with Mexico. So it's interesting that they discovered it so far away. So there's some interesting questions and mysteries there as well.
Okay, the mysterious frog, the traveling frog. So tell me how you first encountered this substance. Were you seeking it out? Like, did you find a retreat center? How did it come into your life?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I was definitely not seeking it out. I didn't know that I was ever going to find it. I didn't think it was going to be, hard to find, but I definitely wasn't looking for it. So a few years ago, I was traveling in Mexico, and I was in Tulum at the time. And I was walking down the street, minding my own business, middle of the day, bright, sunny, warm, hot, humid day. And all of a sudden, out of the right-hand corner of my eye, I saw these white letters standing along the sidewalk. And I was reading them, and it said TMD. And I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm reading those backwards. It's supposed to say DMT. And I said to myself, well, that's strange. I turned right, I looked, and I saw this. It was basically a retreat center that offers Bufo Alvarius ceremonies in Tulum. And it was a interesting little cosmic happenstance, if you will, because as I wrote in my article about this, there's the interesting Hunter S. Thompson quote about LSD, that you don't find LSD, LSD finds you when it thinks you're ready. So I felt it was kind of something similar with the toad, because I figured, well, here's my shot, here's my chance. And I think it had a little bit more authenticity and validity because it found me. I wasn't really seeking it. So I decided to take the plunge and check it out.
Okay, very cool. So you walk on into this retreat center. Is this like a group space, a one-on-one experience? Like, what is the setting for this like?
Yeah, so I definitely I definitely try and take as much caution as I can prior to doing any kind of psychedelic work when I'm either in the States, in a foreign country, in Mexico, and especially when I'm alone. I was traveling alone at the time. So I definitely want to make sure the place is reputable and I get some kind of vibe that I can trust them and I'm going to feel comfortable and things like that. So I didn't walk off the street and do it right away. I went in there kind of on a recon mission, if you will, just to kind of feel it out and meet the people, run into place, ask them some questions. So that's what I did. They have an office. I walked in the office and I was talking with a couple of the gentlemen, and I was very upfront and forward with them. And I told them, I said, hey, I work in the psychedelics industry. I've already done, ayahuasca, regular DMT, just about everything. I'm very experienced. I want to make sure that I feel safe and above all that I'm not going to get scammed and that this is the real deal. And they assured me, and I really liked the answers that they gave me. I felt like they knew what they were doing and they were reputable guys. It wasn't dodgy. The office was clean and new and brightly lit and stuff like that. It wasn't some back alley fly-by-night operation. And so I said, okay, cool. Give me a couple days. Let me think about it. And then, I'll call you. And if I want to go forward, I'll make an appointment.
Okay. That seems incredibly responsible. The concept that you could just walk into a place and be like, oh, hey, what's up? I'm curious about your DMT. Like, that just is so strange to be like here in the States thinking about, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And there's one of the guys just sitting there casually on a couch while the other guy's behind the counter. I mean, it was like walking into, I don't know, like a smoke shop or something.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. I'm like thinking about like my first cannabis dispensary experiences. I'm like, imagine if it were just, like.
Yeah. And to answer your other question, it was a one-on-one experience, which I was also very interested in because most of the retreats and ceremonies I've done, the majority of them have been group experiences. So I was looking forward to that opportunity to doing it one-on-one. So yeah, in the end, I gave it a couple of days thought because I didn't want to take this lightly. And I did eventually call them back and I booked a ceremony and went back there, I think, a couple days later I believe it was, well, at first, I think it was supposed to be 9 or 9:30 in the morning. And then they double booked and it got delayed, which really kind of sucked in the end because I didn't want to keep mulling it over in my mind. I didn't want to ruin my my set. The setting was going to be fine because it's in the jungle of Tulum and, nature, beautiful. That was all good to go. But I didn't like the extra 2-hour delay. And then I had to go back there at 11 or 11:30 in the morning. I think it was on a Friday. So it was a great way to start the weekend, but kind of strange doing Bufo, smoking the toad at 11 or 11:30 in the morning. But it was fine in the end.
Yeah. And no need for that extra time to be like, is this really what I want to be doing today?
Yeah. That's rough. It's kind of like having a delay of game before the Super Bowl or something like that.
Yeah. You're already in the space. Okay, so all right, well, let's get into it. Like, you're there now. Your appointment's starting. Like, does it very much feel like a ceremony setting? Like, is there anything before you smoke the Bufo, like any part of ritual that takes place, or how's it set up?
Yeah, there's a little bit. So it was interesting because there's a teepee set up in the middle of the jungle, big, huge white teepee. And I walked back there and there was a shaman in there. And we chatted a little bit, had some conversation. It was nice because we found out we had some overlapping social circles and knew some mutual people. He was an American. So that was really nice. That gave me some comfort and a lot of trust because, this is kind of like, bearing your soul to the universe. And I definitely want to trust the person, the shaman that I'm doing this with. So that gave me a big boost of comfort and confidence. And so we chatted for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then he gave me una limpia, spirit cleansing, soul cleansing, which is very common and popular across Mexico. They do it with an incense called copal, where they put it around your body. And so you get this incense to cleanse you. And he says a few kind of prayers and things like that. And then after that, I sit down on the floor and we start preparing to actually smoke the toad. And then that's when things get really very quite real. Sitting in this big, huge white tent, it's just him and I can see him, getting the bowl and the medicine ready. And he asked me if I wanted to do a dry run, a practice run. And I said, no, I've already had a 2-hour delay. Let's just get this done and over with. And so that's when you're in for it. It kind of feels like you're in some kind of arena for some pay-per-view events, even though nobody's watching, but it certainly feels that way.
All right. So you're just smoking this in a pipe? Do you take one hit, multiple hits? What does it taste like?
Yeah, so it's just one huge, gigantic hit. It's just a small little conspicuous looking glass bowl, and there's a powder in it. And he holds the bowl. Actually, I held the bowl. He held the lighter, which is one of those kind of like torch lighters. And he instructs you to just, as soon as he lights the powder, to just inhale it as deeply and as big as possible in one hit, if possible. So that's what I did. I just inhaled as deep and as big as I ever could in my life. And then he instructs you to kind of do a pinhole exhale. So kind of go like this, just very small and very deliberately for about 10 seconds. So that you maximize the uptake of the Bufo. And I did that, no problems, very easy, but not even like 5 seconds into the exhale, I started having issues, and I was like, oh boy, this is the real deal. Yeah.
What kind of issues? Like you're starting to get high like very quickly?
Yeah. So I, for the most part, throughout my life using psychedelics, I rarely have open eye visuals. I do sometimes. It depends on the quality of the medicine, setting, things like that. But usually I don't. And it was less than 5 seconds into the exhale of the Bufo, and I started seeing these. What did I say? Roughly the size is like a $50 sized hexagons just breaking out all around the inside of the teepee, and they were these Technicolor, vibrant, shimmering rainbow colored hexagons that were breaking out, kind of in a beehive pattern on the inside walls of the teepee, and, just 4 or 5 seconds in, and I'm already seeing this just break out everywhere. And that really opened my eyes, literally and figuratively, pun intended, because I knew how strong that medicine was. I had never, ever experienced anything like that in my life. And then that started causing me to feel a little bit of fear, because I figured, if that's only a few seconds in, what's this going to be like 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now?
Did you then keep your eyes open for the rest of this experience, or did you close your eyes?
No. So after that, after finishing the exhale, I wish I could see my face, what the look on my face would be like. It's got to be quite interesting. But after that, the shaman kind of with his hands gently guided me to lay down on the floor. Because I imagine the look on your face after doing that has to be one of just utter, like chaos and desperation and fear and anxiety and excitement, all these things mixed up into one. And so I lied down. And then as soon as I lied down, got my head on the pillow, closed my eyes. And then, you're off into, whatever or wherever you're off and into. And so, my eyes were definitely closed for the rest of the duration of the medicine.
So is this the type of experience, like, were you grounded enough to know that you were still where you were here in the teepee with the shaman, or at this point had you kind of like took off into another space?
Yeah, so there's some interesting videos and articles about this online, about the different stages of DMT. And I think there's five possible stages you can progress through. And I definitely went through at least 4 of those, probably all 5. And at first, after I lied down, I felt extreme fear, anxiety. It was really bad. I experienced the same thing when I had smoked regular DMT before. So it wasn't unfamiliar for me, but it was much, much more intense. I started thinking, what am I doing? Adam, you're crazy. You're here alone in the jungle doing this by yourself. You have no friends with you. You're going to die. I need my mom. I mean, it's a very intense experience. It gets up onto you, into you, and all over you really, really fast. And it has you questioning, why did you do this? Because you do, at least for me, I did feel like I was going to die. And that lasted, the time-space continuum collapses. So you're not really sure how much time has elapsed. And so, that could feel like an eternity or just a few split seconds. And eventually I thought to myself, whoa. I have to stop this. I'm not an amateur. I'm not a novice. And I know what to do when this happens, is just to let go. You have to let go. That's the number one rule of doing, any kind of psychedelic medicine when you're having this existential conflict with your set in your mind, to not allow it to give you a bad experience. You actually have to give in, just let go and surrender and totally let the medicine do what it wants to do to you and let it take you where it wants to take you. So as soon as I did this, man, poof, just all those bad negative thoughts, all the fear almost nearly evaporated. But then I went to some quote unquote place that was still slightly scary, but this is when things kind of got very, very interesting. It's I forgot which stage it is. It might be the second or the third stage of the DMT experience. It's called the waiting room. And I kind of went into this waiting room and experienced this nebulous, amorphous kind of energy entity. It kind of looks like some kind of nebula from space to me. And it was very dark and black and purple. And it felt very omnipotent and omnipresent. And I felt like it was kind of shaping me up to let me into the next stage or the next place I was going. It definitely felt like some kind of cosmic security guard or bouncer or something like that. And I seemed to be kind of communicating with it. I don't know if it was telepathically or not, but it was a very interesting presence. And it was kind of saying to me, do you know what I can do to you? I can crush you in an absolute instant. Like I was simultaneously terrified and fascinated by this thing. And then after a little while, I kind of, my sense of it and feeling of it changed. And I kind of started suddenly feeling something indigenous, like an indigenous spiritual ancient presence that was also very similar to ayahuasca and Mother Ayahuasca. And as soon as I felt that, I felt very much more comfortable. I felt like there was some kind of um, crossover or relationship going on between the toad and ayahuasca at that point. And that really comforted me and gave me a lot of trust to just then further let go and give into this, this entity, this energy, whatever it was. And then that was the end of the waiting room. And as they say, after that, I had a breakthrough.
So you compared it to ayahuasca a little bit. Would you say that that's because of a feminine energy, or would you almost feel that this maybe Bufo has more of a masculine energy, or was that not even present?
Definitely ayahuasca is a feminine energy. I do feel Bufo is a bit different, but maybe it's not. I don't know. But I was glad the feminine energy was there. I felt like it was there as maybe a balance and a comfort. It was very welcome. It was very unexpected. I've never heard about anything like that before, but it was very interesting, and it made me feel a lot better, because usually, at least for me, ayahuasca it comes on much slower. The uptake is much slower. It's much smoother. And it's much more like maybe like a movie. You're living, kind of a movie, whereas Bufo is just, it just slams into you like a freight train, and there's no comfort. It's not smooth. It's not easy. You lose total control, and you're just kind of thrown out there, and it's scary.
So what happens during this breakthrough?
That's the interesting part. It's ineffable. It's very difficult to put into words. However, some of the people that are working on these DMT stages, talking about it online, are starting to develop language for it, which is very helpful to describe these experiences. So, it's ineffable. There's no words for it, but there's a few things that can help describe it. One of the things is oceanic boundlessness. You just feel you're not only connected to everything, but you are everything. There's no separation between anything in the universe and you. You are one with the universe. And this is happening while, I've totally lost any concept of Adam, I, me, any kind of identity, ego. I was just completely gone. I'm no longer here on Earth. My body may have been here, but mentally, whatever is going on up in here is just there's no remaining concept of it. So also at the same time, it's ego death, which is turned into a very kind of cliche phrase until something better comes along to replace it. But there is this type of ego death as well. And then while this is happening, and this unity and oceanic boundlessness and ego death, just full on hyperspace, cosmic fractal mandalas, geometry, I would call it cosmically fractalicious, just intense, inexplicable, ineffable, sacred geometry that's just coming, at you from every which angle, or you are the geometry. It's very difficult to describe because there's no separation between you and the experience. You're just it. You are contained within the experience. It's kind of like the riff on the old Rumi line, you're a drop in the universe and the universe in a drop. So it's difficult to describe.
So at this part of your experience, are you now has the fear pretty much dissipated? It has been replaced with this awe, or this, whatever it would be described as,
So
scared of medicine.
the waiting room part, I think is the medicine, whatever the entity, whatever you want to call it, is, shaping you up and making sure that you're cool to enter. And once you get in, it's like walking into the club or something like that. Then you can get onto the dance floor and have fun. So yeah, all the fear had totally evaporated and gone away. And then, yeah, it just turns into this, this ineffable mystical experience that is unexplainable. There's no words for it. And it's something that you'll never, ever forget. It's so intense. And nothing like you've ever seen or experienced, in normal day-to-day reality, that it's completely mind-blowing. And that's the fascinating thing that is happening now in the Bufo world, is this conversation of, what's behind that. There's a very interesting researcher, neuroscientist out there who does the podcast circuit, Andrew Gallimore. I believe he's based in Tokyo, and he's trying to study this with other researchers. I think he's worked with Rick Strassman as well, to figure out, what's driving this experience. Because, of course, one side of the conversation are people that are romantics, and they believe that this is a different level of consciousness, a different dimension. It's fourth dimension, fifth dimension. It's some different frequency that we're tuning into, which I have a bias towards. I'm a romantic as well, and I would like to believe that, but there's no proof for that. And then you do have other people on the other side of the conversation who are more rational materialists, more empirical, more scientific about it, and believe this is just being purely generated in the brain. And if that's true, I find that equally fascinating and just as much of a mystery, because as Andrew Gallimore talks about, where, if this is generated solely in the brain and isn't being downloaded or tuned into from somewhere else, where's that coming from? There has to be something in the brain that the brain learned to model those visions after. So where did it produce that model or that modeling to design that experience? I mean, to me, that's just as mysterious, because there's nothing in your day-to-day baseline reality that will ever come anything close to producing those types of visions. So, either side is, I find, equally fascinating, intriguing, and mysterious.
It's kind of hard to comprehend too, then, like, I probably lean more towards this romantic side of things too. And I want to see all of that aspect, because it just fills me with wonder and curiosity. But I have a hard time with the science aspect, but I suppose I'm equally intrigued. But how could we even possibly explain something like, so many people, when they have these type of intense experiences, especially with DMT, there's so many similar themes that everybody seems to talk about. Yet the experience itself is wildly unique. It means something incredibly different to every single person. But the more and more I talk to people, the more and more these similar themes of humanity continue to come up. So that part does fascinate me. Like, our brains are so individual. How could we possibly describe that this substance is literally just having this? It's just a chemical effect. This is just a response. That's an interesting piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, and maybe in some way it gives more credence to the kind of romantic side of things, because these similar experiences that people share in common, maybe this gets to something like Jungian archetypes, this collective unconscious where these archetypes exist that everybody can experience. And then just to play devil's advocate, if it's not coming from there, or the romantic, other dimension, other level, frequency of consciousness side of things, and your brain is modeling this, how and why was our brain designed to do this? What's the purpose for that? What's the evolutionary, purpose for that? And when did that start? For our brain to have that ability and to model those things, God, how many millennia, tens, hundreds of thousands of years did that take for the brain to develop that capacity and that ability? And, then it always gets back to another fascinating question, who was the first person that discovered this venom that this toad secreted out of its back would provide this experience, and That's something that people ask a lot about ayahuasca because of the thousands of plants in the jungle in the Amazon. How did they figure out that it was these two combined that would give you this experience? And, many shamans will say, oh, it's the plants that told us. It was a vision from the plants. So, who was the first person to take this venom off the toadback? And then why did our brain, if that was the first person who ever did it, what happened? Was it the same as what we're experiencing now? Was it more toned down? How many millennia have human beings been using this medicine or this substance to arrive at this point now where we're having these intense, unexplainable, ineffable visions?
And then looking forward, like, will the human brain evolve to a certain point where we can just access that, like turn it off and on at will, or how would that, looking hundreds and hundreds of years in the future,
yeah,
how could that evolve?
That's fascinating. Yeah, there's another study being done at the Imperial College of London with extended state DMT. Volunteers are being given intravenous DMT for hours on end, and they're studying the neural brainwave patterns and what's going on at that time. This research is getting extremely fascinating because there's a very big undercurrent of things happening around the world right now, which is this kind of these threats to rational materialism. We're suddenly realizing that there's maybe more to the world going on around us than rational materialism can explain with the senses or through empiricism, which is extremely exciting and fascinating. And of course, Bufo and DMT are a big part of this. And it's kind of ironic because the scientific method is being now proven to show that there's a lot of things probably going on out there in the world that can't be put under a microscope, that can't be measured, weighed, or seen or experienced through the five senses. And another person doing interesting work along these lines is Dean Radin at IONS. What is it? The International Organization of Noetic Sciences. So this whole field is growing, and maybe not in our lifetime, but a few generations from now, there's going to be some huge changes to the way we frame and perceive the world because it's going to go outside the boundaries of rational materialism.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating to consider that this psychedelic use could potentially lead us to understanding parallel universes, alternate timelines, just stuff that like exists in science fiction now,
Yeah.
like maybe it's not science fiction.
Yeah. And the other thing I think about, I think people have discussed is that, of course, the naked human eye only sees, a small bandwidth of the entire light spectrum. So do our brains work in a similar way? Is something like 5-MeO DMT expanding that consciousness spectrum and tuning us into a different part of the bandwidth that we normally can't tune into or download or something like that. This is really the most fascinating part of this whole experience for me is going those deeper levels and those realms beyond and trying to figure out what that's all about. Because I don't know if this is related or not, but there's all this talk and things lately in pop culture about UFOs and aliens. Is that a different bandwidth of our consciousness, or are those legitimate creatures, entities? I mean, it's really fascinating the things that are going on nowadays in terms of undermining and kind of poking holes in this very basic concept of rational materialism.
So I have a couple more questions about your experience. So how long did this go on? Like, as you're kind of in this breakthrough state, this ineffable place, how long were you there? And then like, what was the experience of coming back out of it? Like, was it all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm tethered to earth, gotta drop back down?
Yeah, that's also just as fascinating. It's extremely short. Years ago, I believe it was in the 1980s, DMT, not 5-MeO DMT so much, but DMT was very popular with a certain demographic. And its nickname was the businessman's lunch. because you had these suits, maybe even Wall Street suits in the 1980s, doing it on their lunch break. And that's why it got its nickname. And they were doing it on lunch break because it's very, very short duration. So 5-MeO DMT, the toad, is the same. It only lasts about 15 to 20 minutes. It's extremely short, extremely quick. And so it's nothing like ayahuasca. You know, ayahuasca could go on 6, 7, 8 hours. So it's very unique in that regard, in that it has a very short duration. And so when it finishes, it's almost equally confusing and bizarre, because it's just like a snap of the fingers. It's done. It's over, and you're back. And there's no transition. It's just like you're dropped back on Earth or something, or it's like a balloon popping, and you're back into baseline consciousness. And I open my eyes, and I'm lying on the floor of the teepee, and there's almost no after effects whatsoever. There's the visions are over. You're back to being who you are. I was back to being Adam. I had an I again, a me. My ego was back. You know, everything is quote unquote normal again. But you've just had this you know, inexplicable experience that you're just blown away by. So one of the few after effects is, you know, an afterglow of, you know, maybe something between ecstasy and hysteria, because you're trying to compute this experience. And I definitely experienced that. I came out of it basically ecstatic and hysterical, but in the best way you can imagine, not in a crazy, mentally unwell way. I imagine if somebody off the street saw me, they would probably think, whoa, that guy's lost it, which to some extent might be true. But I came out of it like, I just wanted to talk right away. And I just started going on this epic cosmic rant. And, you know, within a minute or two, I kind of came up in a start. And my shaman said to me, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, you're getting out of this too fast. Lie back down. He said, you can talk, say whatever you want, as much as you want, but just lie back down. So he lied me back down. And yeah, I just kind of went on this legendary rant about, you know, the world isn't about materialism, consumerism, the size of your house, what kind of car you drive, the clothes that you wear, you know, all these types of things. You know, there's something greater out there that is waiting for all of us to connect to and give us deeper meaning in life. And that's something that's so critical right now, especially in the West, and even more so in the United States, that we have something deeper to connect to and find something along those lines that gives us some kind of fulfillment and feeds our spiritual hunger. Because this system of consumerism and materialism that we've been fed as a bill of goods. And I think many Americans, especially since the pandemic, are waking up to the fact that this has just led us to emptiness, just to societal emptiness. And people are really, really hungry, if not starving, for something to fulfill or just fill that spiritual emptiness, that spiritual void. And, you know, once you do something like the toad, there's no going back. It's more or less kind of like lifting the veil on the matrix.
So would you say of all the psychedelics you've sat with that this had perhaps the most profound impact?
Yeah. Many of the other experiences I've done, I mean, they've also been meaningful, especially with ayahuasca. But this by far is the most life-altering, mind-altering, intense. It's definitely not for amateurs. I have met somebody recently who never done psychedelics and did that for the first time. And I was like, whoa. And actually, now that I think of it, I met somebody else who had never done psychedelics before and did Bufo the first time. And that is, I can't imagine, because to somehow take that experience and then to integrate it into your normal baseline reality, it's daunting. That's something before I started using psychedelics in a much more spiritual and therapeutic way. You know, I used to think, integration, no big deal. when I first started hearing people talk about it, I thought that wasn't very important. But then, after doing ayahuasca, and then especially after doing the toad, yeah, integration is everything. You definitely want to have at least a week, 2 weeks, preferably a month after doing the toad to just, figure things out, because it's just such a shock to your worldview and how you even just perceive yourself. It's something that's not going to be easy to fit the puzzle pieces together afterwards.
So speaking of integration, what does that look like to you? What is your process of integration, and what are practical steps you take to sift through this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I do that are common integration techniques. So it's there's a lot of available methods and practices that one can do. So it's not just limited to the stuff that I like, but I do some of the most common stuff. Yoga, some type of body work is great. I love journaling. Journaling is really that's helps sort out this chaotic mental, spiritual, psychic space that you might be in after doing psychedelics, especially the toad. And then above all, I love spending time alone in nature. So I was very fortunate that I was in Mexico when I did the toad, because after that, I was just backpacking through Mexico by myself, spending a lot of time alone in nature in the jungles and things like that. And so that is hugely, hugely important. A lot of people don't spend enough time out in nature, much less time alone in nature. And you really find when you do a lot of that, nature is a healer. It's there to help you, support you, heal you, soothe you. And that time alone in nature can really, really help sort out all of that uncertainty, chaos, the unknown of what's going on in your mind, body, and spirit after doing DMT or Bufo. It's one of the biggest helpers and supporters out there.
All right. Well, I have one last question for you. Will you sit with Bufo again?
I don't know. It's one of those things. Maybe it's a big firm. Maybe I would be comfortable doing it again. But yeah, it's just so strong and so intense. It's not something that you just pick up like drinking a cocktail on the weekend or a beer or something like that. So I think if it found me again, I would do it again. But I don't need to go out with intention or purpose and to find it specifically. Although I did meet a cabbie once in Mexico City, and I, as very often happens in my life, just get into talking about psychedelics with people. And through this random conversation with this cabbie, I found out that he was a Bufo shaman, curandero practitioner, and he had done Bufo 50 times, he told me. And I was like, wow, whoa. I don't know that I need to do it 50 times. It would be impressive if I just did it twice. But to see that he was still, very much healthy, could hold a conversation with me while driving a car after smoking the toad 50 times, quite impressive. So, for some people, it's very safe. I would take it, with a ton of, respect and try and be, as safe about it as possible. And definitely, be careful with contraindications, any kind of prescription medications and things like that. So to answer your question, yeah, I do it again, but I'd wait for it to find me and let it tell me when it thinks I'm ready.
Wait for that sign on the side of the road to just call you back out again. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing today, Adam. Really appreciate your story.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me, Holly. I really, really am grateful for the opportunity to share my experience, and I hope we can talk again soon.